I'm actually a shy and retiring person, really, so I don't want to be doing all the talking. And if I start talking absolute, you know what, then someone hit me quick. I've had a word with both my brain cells, and they promised to behave. So, very briefly, I'll give you a little bit of history about how I managed to be there on April the 2nd. I first went down the islands in 1974 for 12-month draft. That's what they were, all 12-month drafts. I only actually went there because I'd just finished an A3's course, and one of the lads there had been married just a couple of months previous, and the last thing he wanted to do was leave his new wife and go down the islands for 12 months. So we swapped drafts, basically. That's how I got there in the first place. I went back a few years later, done another 78, 79 tour, and the guy that was supposed to replace me broke his leg on the last day at the troop piss-up. So I was naturally said I'd stay again. By that time I had a wife and kids, and eventually the MOD saw sense and I stayed for a second year. I left at the back of 81, went back to UK. Within 6 months I was back in the islands again as a civvy. And then these scrap metal men, Argentine scrap metal men, went down south, and without asking the governor's permission. How very dare they? And it was quite clear then, really, I think, that something was going to happen. Something out of the ordinary was about to happen. And I remember having a conversation with the then wife, and saying that if it does, you know, if the balloon does go up, then I'm going to go back up Moody Brook with the lads. I must have been reading the future, because that's exactly what happened. I was baking bread. If any of you read Ricky's book, it tells you all about it. If you haven't, get one. They're only 25 quid. It come over the radio that, yeah, invasion was imminent next morning. So I left my bread on the side of the Rayburn, blazing away, got my kit on, phoned up Moody Brook, and I think it was Mike Norman I spoke to. I said, do you need another hand? Like, well, within 15 minutes or so, the Rover was at my door. Whizzed up to Moody Brook. I remember walking the armoury, and there wasn't even a cobweb in the army, not a speck of dust. Everything had been taken out. Went across to our accommodation where the lads were, and within 10 minutes I was fully geared, and ended up staying at Government House that night and taking part in the defence of Government House. Now, during that action, which was an action, let me tell you, we put back at least three, on our section, we put back at least 3 attacks from down the hill. The Argentines took casualties, and we never. It was great. Sir Rex never ever said the S word. He said, it's time to lay your weapons down, and he was as close as Colin and I are when he said it. And I'm the only person in history to have told the governor to F off and get away with it. I did say sir afterwards. I said, F off, sir. And he sort of looked at me and put his hand on my shoulder and said, no, come on, Jim, we've had enough now. It's too much. And that's how we surrendered. Did I say the S word? Mm. Yeah. But everybody else says we surrendered. We never surrendered. We never did. We were told to lay our weapons down, and those were Sir Rex's words. Lay your weapons down, lads. We're giving in. It's enough. That's another historical thing with Wikipedia that we can kick into the dark woods, because that's where it belongs. Before the Argentines actually came down to our position, I made it back into Government House, and I knew exactly where Sir Rex kept his beer, but they had great big padlocks on it, but they weren't bayonet proof, and I managed to get a load of beer out of there and pass it round the lads. Went back outside after that, and then obviously we were all taken prisoner. Now, when I started off, I had a green beret on my head, but when I came out of there, I didn't, because of an incident that happened earlier, and I was really peed off that I'd lost my green lid. But in actual fact, it's the thing that saved me from getting sent home with the rest of the guys. That and the FIDF, believe it or not. They'd all been up at the racecourse, which was a little bit further towards Moody Brook than we were. They were all captured by the Argentines, marching down the road. And while we were sat there, you know, we've all seen the photograph, no doubt, of us Marines sitting in the big green field. There was one guy in there, if you look closely, who was actually wearing a brown beret. He was a lad from the FIDF. His name escapes me now, but it doesn't matter. He'd actually been commandeered to take some Argentine officers from wherever they were to Government House. Now, when Pat Peck, who was in charge of the FIDF then, saw the brown beret amongst all us greens, he said to the Argentine officer, "Look, that's one of my lads." You know? So they come over to get me, or to get him, sorry. And being sharp as tacks, the lads were saying, "You get out here, Jim, lad." You know. So eventually, that's how I got out. When Pat Peck come up and got this fella out, somebody else shouted, "Don't forget Jim, he's one of yours too." And Pat Peck, for all his age and his doddery old ways, sharp as a tack, said, "Yeah, come on Jim, we'll get you home, lad." And that's how I didn't get sent back with the rest of the boys. That's how I managed to stay in town. We were taken back to the FIDF hall, and I thought, now the fun's going to start. We're going to be interrogated and all the rest of it. Not a thing. Not a thing. The next thing we know, it's a good few hours later, they said, "Right, we want like groups of 4 of you to come out at a time, we'll take you home." And I'm thinking, nah, something wrong here. Something wrong. But that's eventually what happened. We were all sat in the back of this, 4 of us sat in the back of a short wheelbase Land Rover, one of the locals. And they said, "Right, you've all got to take your tops off." And I thought, hang on a minute. I was actually wearing a parasmock at the time. But underneath it, I had my woolly pulley with my flashes and my stripes on. I had my shirt with my stripes on. I even had a string vest, I think, something like that, because it was bloody cold. So I thought, how am I going to get out of all this without anyone seeing commando flashes? And I tried to get out the vehicle. He said, "No, stay in, you'll get shot." I thought, bloody hell, this is from an Argentine officer, like, you know. So I said, "Boys, we need a hand here." So these other 3 lads, FIDF lads, they were pissing themselves laughing at the actions, trying to get these 4 layers of clothing off all at once in the back of a short wheelbase Land Rover. If you find a short wheelbase Land Rover somewhere, try it, guys. See how far you get. Eventually, with the help of the other 3 lads, it all come off together, and I sort of bundled it up under my arm. And I was actually taken home. Couldn't believe it. Walked down to the door, went in, wife, kids, hello, how you doing? Looked across at my bread. I'll have to throw that away now. Rock solid. So that was how I managed to get in the Marines and out of the Marines in 24 hours almost. Anything to add, Bungie? Have I missed anything?
Not really, no.
Good. Shut up now then. But as Rachel has sort of suggested, we didn't sit around waiting for the task force. Everybody, every local that was there, did something. Whatever they were able to do, they would do. Patrick Watt's mum lived just up from us, and she would bring over milk for the kids, because they were both very young, like one the baby.
She had a cow in her back garden.
She had a cow in her back garden, which she used milk daily. Other people done whatever they could. The vet would walk around with his stallion D, you know what is, and they, let me tell you, they would cut through anything. We all walked around with pliers in our pockets and stuff like that. It got to such a state that towards the latter end, especially after the task force had arrived, you were looking around for wires to cut. There were none left because they were already cut. You know, there were that many people going around. There were people who were going around looking after the old folk. There were people who were organising school for the kiddies in the living rooms. You know, it was probably the for me anyway, it was probably the biggest mass help, if that's the right word, that everybody gave to everybody else throughout that time. At no time ever did I hear anybody say or even allege that the British wouldn't come back and save us. From day one, from minute one, everybody knew that Britain wouldn't stand still. They would send you wonderful people to come and save us. And that was the one thread I think that kept everybody going. And as soon as Ma'am Thatcher said the task force is coming, the atmosphere in town, those people that were left in town, because a lot of them did take the kids and move out to camp. They weren't any safer, but they thought they were. I think the atmosphere lifted and everybody redoubled their efforts. And the first thing when you woke up in the morning, apart from saying, right, I'm okay, I'm still here, I'm alive, the first thing I said, right, what can I do to stitch these buggers up next? I'm trying to keep your language very clean because that. We'll have a sup.
So what did you do, Jim, to stitch them up?
Everything and anything. Sorry, who's that? All right. Everything and anything. There were no fags in the FID, no fags in the FIC store, not for Argentines. The tins of meat and stuff were taken off shelves and they were hid away, so the Argentines couldn't buy them. You know, we would do just about anything. They tried to make us drive on the right hand side. We would drive on the left, where we always drove. And it didn't matter how big the truck was coming towards us, we would just stay there. And we would make them come out with their guns and everything else, and they would all be gibbering away and, what we done wrong? You know, just literally anything we could possibly do. There were a couple of people I know that had 2 metre sets. I know one particular one was up the chimney, and they would just broadcast blind on various frequencies that they hoped people would be listening in, and it turned out after a lot of people were listening in, including the Argentines, but they never found anybody, never caught anybody. If one time I was very, very nearly lifted by a not very nice Argentine major. Monsignor Spraggan was there, and within 2 seconds of him raising his voice, it seemed to me that half the locals in Stanley were there around me. You know, it was that sort of, well, if they wanted me, they were going to get through the rest. As it happened, Monsignor Spraggan sorted it out, and I trotted off home quite happily. Well, not happily, actually, but I trotted off home. But we would go out every day. I would tour the town, as it was then. It could easily be done in a couple of hours. Try it nowadays, it could take an awful lot longer. And you would just look where everything was. Oh, they've moved that. And the exocets, when they put them up on the top road on Davis Street, they moved them every day back into town. And at night time, they moved them back out to the edge of town. But it was literally only the edge of town. Within 50 yards of those exocets were homes where people were living. And they used and abused things like that all the time. But we would know, and we would tell people. People would say, oh yes, I saw this last night. I saw this ship coming in. I saw that happening. So all this information was going around, and it was all finding its way back to the ham radio people. And a lot of that information was, we know now, received by the task force. Whether it helped them or hindered them, I don't know, but the information was always there. Nobody did nothing. Everybody did whatever they could do at the time, and it was just, I thought it was fantastic, you know, that the task force knew that we were there with them. Now, when they arrived, they were actually actively helping them. Land Rovers, tractors, trailers, out in the camp of, you know, Goose Green, San Carlos, all this. They were loading ammunition onto the back of the tractors and the trailers, and Falkland Islanders were driving these things straight through minefields, some of them, where they wanted the ammunition, where they wanted the casualties. The Falkland Islanders were there, and they were getting stuck right in. Never faltered, ever. And I was pleased, and very proud to be part of that, because I was really a Falkland Islander then. Having lost my Greenberry, I had to be. There were other times where funny, silly things happened. We had to move out of our house. It was a wooden house right on the top of Davis Street. Gave a beautiful view of the harbour, but was in a very dangerous and exposed position, I felt, for the family. My then father-in-law was down in what was the Kelper store, which is now a very good pub actually. If you ever go to Falkland, it's a great pub now. It was a stone house, big stone house. So we moved down there. I tinned up that house before I left. I thought not even a blinking mouse would get in it while we were away. I was wrong, but that's another tale. But while we were down there, the one beauty with the Kelper store was it had a loft, and it had a window in the loft where I could see up the harbour and I could see down the harbour. I could just get up to Two Sisters where Moody Brook was on that side, and I could see the airport on that side. And I spent a lot of time in that loft, watching, remembering, passing on information to next day to people. I saw the hospital ship come in and unload Exocets. As God is my witness, they came off the hospital ship. 2 of them. You shake, you know, you see it. Yeah, I know you were there. You saw it too. Paraiso. That was a boy. That was a boy. So that's another myth we can kick into the dark spaces. That's. Sorry?
I'll start the next book now.
Yeah, okay, pal. Cross my palm with silver, I might let you. Now, at the back of the house, we had the peat shed, and all our hens were in the peat shed because the Argentines were nicking anything that walked. They were hungry. They were in quite a sorry state. You guys weren't far away. And I saw all these boys next to the peat shed. Sorry, let me explain. There was a garage backed onto it. I don't know whose garage it was, but I did know that there was a window in the back of the garage up against the peat shed. The glass had been removed and there was a bit of wood in the hole. So I wondered what they were putting in there. I couldn't see, because obviously it was the wrong direction for me. I couldn't see it from the loft, I couldn't see it from the kitchen window, but I could see all these people moving these cases of stuff into the garage. So I said to then father-in-law, I says, see, once curfew's on, we'll sneak out and we're going to have a look. And he said, well, you can't go out after 8 o'clock. You can't do that. Yes, we can. So we did. Took the piece of wood out very carefully, so I didn't know if there may be somebody in the place, like, you know. But anyway, no, we got the wood out, looked through the window, and there's all these cases of Argentine brandy. Can't remember what it was called, but it had a guy on a little racehorse on the label. Argentine brandy. I said, we know a few people could do with a couple of these bottles. So we started getting these cases out through this little window. I got through the window, pushed me through the bugger, and we started moving these cases of brandy out. Very thirsty job moving brandy. Now, my ex-father-in-law wasn't a drinker by any means, but he had the top that night. In fact, we both had a top. No, I'm telling you a lie, we both had a bottle, at least. We were out of our heads come the end of it. We were peed as tarts. When we went back into the house, we hid all these cases and piled the peat up against it, like ready to distribute it the next day once we were allowed out of the house. The mother-in-law, she went absolutely mental. We had 2 gibbering heaps with all these bad brandy fumes coming out. And I remember waking up in the morning wondering whose head I was wearing and what had happened to my legs again. And I thought, how daft was that? How really stupid was it? But obviously nothing happened. I went back into the shed in the morning, quite late in the morning, and the piece of wood was still there. That, you know, so I fitted it all back in the shed, you know, all up, and nothing ever came of it. I don't know even if anybody ever went back to that garage to get that brandy afterwards. But I do know that the next couple of days I was walking around going clink, 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 handing people bottles of brandy. That was a sort of really silly thing to do, but it did lighten the load a little bit, you know. It cheered people up when I told them the story of how we got it. It cheered people up that there was something else. It was just because it was against the Argentines, you know. There was another time that on my walkabout, I met another chap, so we joined up, and then another chap, and that was 3 of us. Now, we were all told no more than 3 people together, so we thought we were okay walking around. And these Argentines come up to us. They were just kids, really. And I thought, all right, boys, just keep your gob shut, don't say nout. And these kids were practically crying. Have you got any food? Have you got a cigarette? Chocolate? They all loved chocolate. I looked at these 2 blokes and said, have you got any? He said, no. I said, have you got any? No. I said, no, we ain't got none. Well, they were in tears. Absolute tears. And I didn't feel a bit sorry for them. Nor did anybody else. Not a bit. Sounds cruel now, doesn't it? But at the time, we weren't a bit sorry for them. The time we'd sort of done our little walk around and spotted whatever we'd spotted and logged it in our heads ready to pass on to people, we all went back to the West Door, because the West Door was a great meeting point for the locals. It was one of those places where everybody could actually go in and you weren't going to be arrested because there was more than 3 of you together, because you were actually in the shop. An awful lot of information was passed backwards and forwards in there. But these 3 kids were stood outside the West Door there, still crying. They were damn good criers, I'll give them that. And people were actually passing them back at crisps and whatnot. And I said, what are you doing? So we're giving them these crisps. I said, why? I said, because they're 3 years old. Sometimes in those days, when the crisps arrived in the Falklands, they were already out of date. These actual packets were 3 years old, I kid you not. They must have been like eating sponge, and hopefully something else as well that made them not very happy. And that's how we spent our days, really. It was, what can we do to screw them up? How can we make it more difficult for them? How can we stop them being so assertive and trying to knock us down all the time? I went back to the house one day and the tin had been ripped off the door. It wasn't the first one, and it wasn't to be the last. Any empty house the Argies found, they would get in. They would steal anything they wanted. And when they'd finished, they would defecate, I think is the polite word, isn't it? And pee everywhere. And I had quite a collection of photographs then. Not those sort of photographs. What they didn't destroy, they burnt in the Rayburn, or they defecated on. Can I not just say shit? Is that all right?
Yeah.
Everybody over 18, yeah.
Is that the S word?
I'm laughing now, but when I walked in, I was absolutely fuming. They had stolen, my daughter then, she was only 8 months old, 6, 8 months old, every single thing of hers, baby clothes. They had this thing for baby clothes. They'd stolen all the baby clothes, because that's one of the reasons we went up there, A, to check on the house, and B, you know, that she needed more clothes, so I was going to open up and go in. But they'd stolen all these baby clothes. They'd gone through the house and wrecked everything. They'd even got up into the loft. I've never been in the loft in that house, but they'd made a hole and they got in the loft and they'd just stolen everything. There was no food left, and when there was very little there, but they just wrecked the whole thing. And then, rather than to be done with that, defecated and peed everywhere and smeared it on walls, and so it wanton acts basically, you know. And I think, if I remember rightly, there was something like 30 odd houses that happened to in Stanley that were empty because, you know, as I said, people had left earlier to go out to camp with the kids. So that didn't help my demeanour at all. So I thought, right, I'm going to complain to somebody. And I think the guy's name, was it Busser or somebody? One of the Argentines who was supposed to be the sort of liaison with the civilians. And we made a big long list.
Blue Marie.
Blue Marie. We made a big long list of things that were stolen. Then we made another list of things that we would like. And then another list of things we thought, well, why not? Go for it. And we took this list down, and the originals of that list are in the museum in Stanley. And I've got some very bad photocopies in amongst this rubbish I've got here. We went down to him and said, what are you going to do about this? My then father-in-law Richie came down with us, and he could speak quite good Spanish. So he was interpreting the words that Blue Marie missed and things. And we actually came away there with a stack of pesos like that. I think it was about 2 6 worth. But he actually did give us money to pay for what had been stolen, what was on our wish list, what we wish had been stolen, and everything else. So, two contrasting sides. There was these people that were going in, wrecking our homes, making them in a huge mess, and yet there was a guy sitting in Government House, not Government, he was at Secretariat at the time, who was willing to give us money for it, recompense us for what had happened. I said, well, why can't you just tell your guys not to do it? And they said, they know, follow orders. They know, follow orders. And I thought, oh, well, that's good, isn't it? They don't follow orders. I was quite happy with that, really. Obviously, we followed the war as it occurred, as everything occurred. We always listened to BBC, the World Service. The Argentines jammed the one from Britain, so we rigged up a long line, took the old clothesline down, put a new clothesline up, made of wire. Argentines didn't know this. We always used to leave a couple of things pegged on it. Plugged it in. We could actually pick up BBC Africa service. And that was the only one we could pick up, BBC Africa service. And we'd tune into that all the time. And all the Falkland news was on there, just like it was on the BBC London service. And that's how we kept up with the progress of you guys and what was happening and everything. And on the final couple of nights, I was up in the loft, and I thought all my Christmases were coming at once. It was like opening your door and finding a big buxom blonde waiting for you. Because I could see the tracers coming in. I could hear the rounds coming over the top of the house from the ships. You know? And I knew time was up. Like a dog with two dicks. Ooh, like a dog with two bits. Absolutely.
I was going to ask you, Jim, sorry, the one, I know a lot of your story, obviously, I wrote a lot of it, but...
You wrote what I let you?
It's something I've just literally wondered, just walking around the house, and I thought, I wonder that. What was your day, June the 14th, Liberation Day? I've been sent countless diaries and the 49ers and what have you, and I've read them beginning to end. And they're talking about the Argentines running through the streets, throwing their guns away, officers shooting at them, and then just going, oh, it's not working, leg it. And I've heard about people getting emotional, some people stood up and roared and cheered and just said, oh, shoot me if you're going to, because it's never going to get any better than this. Other people just hunkered down and thought it'll all be over and I think it's going to finish. What were you doing June the 14th, Liberation Day? Did you know, what did you see? When did you know all of a sudden it's happening, it's today? And I always wondered, right, what was Jim doing on that day? That was the question.
Hang on a minute. Get the two together. Yeah.
It's the other side.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I've got it. We knew Liberation Day was coming the night before because we'd seen the battles up in the hills. From my position, I could see our tracers coming this way. I could see our grenades coming this way. I couldn't see anything. It was dark, but I knew what the flashes and the lights. And I thought, they're having it. They are actually having it. And I was up there all night, and as daylight come, all I saw was all these ants running down the hills. And they were the Argentines. They were in mass retreat. You know, they weren't retreating as we would understand a retreat. They were running. They were legging it down the hills. Most of the ones that were coming along the bottom of the road, the front road, and the back road, and the middle road, and every other road that was going on, most of them didn't even have weapons. They had ditched them on the way down. They were literally just stood in the clothes that they had on. And they were just defeated. There was no two ways about it. And I'm not just talking about the conscripts here. Those that they weren't the Buzo Tactico, but they were a Marine division, I think, or something from the Argentines. They retained their weapons. They marched through town, but they were going only one way, and that was back to the airport. They were retreating. That was the main thing. Once that was cleared air, I was dressed and out the door in no time. And I think probably 90% of the town were the same. People were out in the back gardens watching, saying, hey, bye-bye, and all this sort of business. And it was really a bit of I couldn't say a party mood by any means, but it was such a relief that you could probably never know, I think, unless you had that. Maybe the girls know, because it must be the relief after having your baby, you know what I mean, that whoosh of just something that's there. You know, something different starts flowing through your brain, and that was there before. And I remember I met up with some guys from 4-5 on the front road. 4-5, aren't you, Matt? Yeah. And I said, introduce myself. Like, I said, right. They said, do you know where everybody is and everything is like? And so we walked all the way down the front road. I was showing them where the bunkers were. I said, don't bother with that over there. It's just a bit of plastic pipe that they've stuck in the ground. I made it look like a bunker. You know, there's nothing in there. I know there's nothing in there. But this one over here under the house that you can't see, I said, you walk under there, that's where a load of Argentines were living. That was their place. That was their machine gun position. We were going through with them, and they were picking Argentines out, arresting them, taking the weapons off them, and we're all marching up. And we finished up right down the other end of town where the oil depot were. That end of where YPs were, and there was a huge mound of weapons there, and all these guys were just, Argentines were just like hunkered down. There was no fight left in them whatsoever, and eventually they were all marched up to the airport road and away. And you were just going around with, you know, you were lightheaded. You were picking up anything you wanted to pick up. I picked up a couple of motorbikes. Took them home, my house, in the peat shed. Great stuff, peat. You can cover everything with peat. A couple of weapons as well, which I did give back when the amnesty arrived a few days later. And it was just such a fantastic, glorious feeling that, you know, they were over. And then when the lads started coming in numbers, everybody was out then. Everybody was cheering. There were flags were waving, all that sort of business, and it was just such a relief. Some of the guys from 4-5 followed me back home, and we had no food, but all I had was about half a sack of spuds, a bit spongy, you know, and the brandy. Yeah, we had plenty of brandy. So we just ended up cooking chips for everybody that come in. Chips galore. Everybody's having a bath. There's no hot water, but there was water. There's no hot water, but they still had a bath. I know. And all we done that for the rest of that day was just make chips for everybody. It doesn't matter who they were. They come in the door. They got a plate of chips. It was all they wanted, chips. And then things just sort of barreled. Then I suppose. Right, we're here, we're on now, we've got to get self sorted out. So then it was, right, what can I do? And my first, not my first thought, but one of the thoughts I had was, shall I go to work and see what's left of it? And I thought, no, because I'd already taken the trip up earlier on, directly after the invasion, where I saw Rachel's Amtrak, and several times, and still denied, and what was left in the back, and on the ionospheric station, which was obviously being used as some sort of dressing station, presumably from the guys that they dragged out of the Amtrak. I can't believe anybody got out of that Amtrak. I seriously cannot believe it. just from the residue that was left after. You know, terrible thing. And it's, yeah.
I know you don't like talking about it, but
Oh, shut up then.
Off Rex.
This was a long time later, mate. A long time later.
When did you find out about that?
It's actually in here. Rex's letter is in there. I can't remember the date on it. I got called to Government House. I thought, crikey, what have I done now? I'm in the shite again. Oh, I'm in the mucky stuff again. But I went and saw Rex. Rex was an absolute gentleman. He was one of the nicest, cleverest blokes I've ever met in my life, apart from me. And I'd had the pleasure of his company, or he had the pleasure of mine, whichever way you want to look at it, for dinner at Government House, and we used to play snooker down at the Colony Club, even snooker upstairs in Government House. But you had to be careful when you play snooker at Government House with Rex, because he knew that table, and if he had the fire going, he knew that would warm that part of the table up, so it'd run a lot faster than the other side, and he used it, a little devil. But he said, "Come in, Jim, sit down." He said, "Do you want a beer?" I said, "Have you got any left?" And we had a beer, and we were just chatting away, and he said, "I've got a letter here, and it's awarding you a civil order of the BEM, British Empire Medal." I said, "Well, that's very nice." I said, "What about the lads?" And he says, I can't remember the words he used, but he said, the list was there, the list has been made. Oh, great. So he said, "Come back and see us on such and such a day, and wear your suit, be a good lad, we'll give you a medal." So fine. And look, I didn't really think much of it at the time. I really didn't. But when I got home, I started thinking, well, hang on a minute. I've got a BEM for doing what I still today consider to be my duty and what I should have done. I couldn't not have done it, and if it happened tomorrow, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But as far as I knew at that stage, lads hadn't got anything. And when Rex pinned that medal on me, or handed me the medal, I said to him, like, "Oh, sir," I said, "I hope the lads are going to get something like this." And he just sort of leaned over, whispered, said, "They bloody well should do." And I knew straight away when he said "should do," I knew something was amiss. Something wasn't. And the lads never have to this day. And this is another reason why we put up with Ricky bloody Phillips. So he can write that book so people can see the truth. And hopefully the lads will get their reward. Eventually things sort of calmed down a bit in town. I went back to being a special policeman again, kicking all these Army, Navy and Air Force fellas out of pubs, trying to make sure they got back to wherever they were going to. We buried 3 Falkland Islanders that had died. We cried when casualty numbers started coming out. We went to church when the paras came in. Went into church. I was actually outside the church with all these fags I've been hoarding, helping themselves as they went in. Other people there with real bags of crisps that weren't 3 years old, you know, things like that. And things just really slowly returned back to normal. People started going to work, cleaning up, getting essential services going again. And slowly the lads started getting on the boats and going home, because we'd already buggered the Argies off early, got rid of them smelly buggers. And it was almost anticlimactic, if you like, that suddenly life was returning to normal. I went back in February, second time I went back. I went back for the 25th anniversary, treated like a king then. I even marched in the parade then for the 25th anniversary, the first and only time I've ever marched in the parade as a civvy. And I went back in February with Bungie, and 8 of us went there, Bungie. We had 2 weeks there, and absolutely brilliant. There's a marvellous lodge they've got there, absolutely fully contained. You only got to say you want to do something, and people are there to do it for you, help you. It's hard to spend any money in the pub. And you walk in the pub and people, still now today, the Falkland Islanders give and give. Yet our own blasted government won't give.
You never imported beer as far as I remember.
Now you are being bloody cheeky. But the Falkland Islands have been given for 35 years. They're still giving. They'll continue giving to likes of you guys. Yet our own British government won't give these guys the recognition they deserve. And I'm hoping that book over there, and if you guys, if you haven't already voted for these fellas to receive their rightful medals, then you can go on, what's it called?
Change.org.
Change.org is the website. The petition's on there. If you haven't already done so, if you feel inclined, you go on there and sign that. We need 10,000 signatures. I think we're at 3.5 or something at the minute. And please do so.